Luka Doncic has an anger issue. Luka Doncic is one of the best young talents in the entire NBA. He is the perfect player for the modernized positionless league that the NBA is beginning to adapt. Being an oversized point guard at 6'6" and being a great ball handler makes him both one of the toughest point guards to defend, as well as being the perfect example of the modernized point guard. Along with this, he is one of the faces of the European takeover of the NBA. Luka skipped the traditional role of playing college basketball through the NCAA, and instead played professional basketball throughout the majority of his teen years. Playing against other professionals as well as grown men since he was only 16 years old, rather than playing against players who were his age, has benefited him, and molded him into the player that he is today, and the player that is one of the best the NBA has to offer. During his international career, Luka averaged 9.2 points, 4.2 rebounds, and 3.5 assists, in only 19.8 minutes per game. When looking at his per 36 minutes average in his international career, which would have given us a better look if he was getting the minutes of an average starter in the NBA, his averages jumped to a very impressive 16.8 points, 7.6 rebounds, 6.4 assists, and 1.4 steals a game. This is incredibly impressive when taking into account that Luka was only a teenager, playing against grown men who have played basketball for a living their entire lives. One thing that stuck out behavior-wise from Luka during his international career was his flaming hot temper, that some would go as far as describing as anger issues. This could be because of the incredibly high motor and competitive drive that Luka has. This is something that would have been a necessity during his overseas career. Being so young compared to the competition, Luka had to stand up for himself and prove himself. If he was a pushover and did not have the angry side of him that pops up from time to time, it is almost certain that he would not have averaged the numbers that he did, and we may not have even seen him in the NBA today. Driven by his anger and competitive spirit, Luka has completely taken over the NBA. He has saved the Dallas Mavericks from a rebuild after the best player in their franchise history, Dirk Nowitzki, retired after 21 years with the team. In Luka's 2 seasons with the Mavericks, he has averaged 24.4 points, 8.5 rebounds, and 7.1 assists. He won the Rookie of the Year award and one of the most highly contested seasons in recent history, and only in his second season, he was in contention to win the Most Valuable Player award. His temper is still prevalent, even as he has made the transition to the NBA, and that temper could again be explained away by his competitive spirit and his desire to prove himself. Today, we will be looking at some of the times that Luka's temper has gotten a bit out of control. I'll just say as a disclaimer, you could make a list like this about any NBA player for the most part, as they are all competitive people with a high desire to win. Fights, lashing out at coaches or referees, and other outbursts of anger are not uncommon in the NBA. And with the pressure of not only carrying his team, but the entire Mavericks organization on his 21-year-old shoulders, it is not a catastrophic event or an outburst to the degree of damaging the name of Luka Doncic, the Dallas Mavericks, or the NBA as a whole. Alright, with that out of the way, let's get into the list. Luka rips his jersey against the Los Angeles Lakers. The first incident to point towards Luka having anger issues comes from a matchup against the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers are one of the best teams in the entire NBA, and currently are the first seed in an extremely competitive Western Conference. In this season, Luka and the Mavericks have played the Lakers very well, and even sent their first meet of the season into overtime. They beat the Lakers by 14 points in their second matchup. The moment I'm going to cover today comes from their fourth and final game against each other this season, in which the Mavericks would be defeated with a final score of 129 to 114. Shortly before the end of the first half, the Mavericks are trailing by a score of 73 to 56, and Luka was sent to the free throw line. He would go on to miss both of the free throws, and in a fit of rage, he tugged on his jersey, resulting in it tearing all the way down to his number. Because the half had not yet ended, Luka was forced to play in his torn jersey for the rest of the half, but he came out in a fresh, untorn jersey at the beginning of the second half. The frustration and lashing out was not limited to just Doncic in this game, however. The Mavericks head coach Rick Carlisle was ejected from the game in the fourth quarter after arguing with a call with an official. After the game, Luka had cooled down and handled himself graciously. He was clearly frustrated with his level of play throughout the night and the result of the game. He was quoted as saying, "I played really bad. I feel like I don't know how to play basketball. It wasn't me. I gotta get better. A lot." Despite him speaking so lowly of his level of play, Luka finished the game with 25 points, 10 rebounds, and 7 assists. This would be a performance that many players would be ecstatic about. However, Luka clearly holds himself to a very high standard and values team success over individual success. His coach was very empathetic and talked up Luka to the press after the game, saying, "Those are emotions and feelings, they're about winning and losing." Ripping the jersey is not something that is uncommon in the NBA. Notoriously, LeBron James did the same thing, ripping the sleeves off of his jersey after missing a three-pointer against the New York Knicks while he was playing for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Luka goes off and calls out the refs to the media. The next moment comes from a game in which the Dallas Mavericks face off against the Indiana Pacers. Referees are seemingly on the top of the hit list of almost every player in the league. There are very few players who have never complained to a ref about a call or showed clear disgust about a call. At times, refs make calls that are questionable and seemingly call fouls differently depending on the player. Despite Luka being a player who makes some of the most trips to the free throw line on a per-game basis, he is still objectively neglected by the officials at times. While it is nowhere near as bad as it was for this player, it is somewhat comparable to what Shaquille O'Neal went through during his career. Both players were oversized for their position, and as a result, can absorb a lot of contact. Because they don't exaggerate the contact that is inflicted on them, sometimes it doesn't appear to be a foul, despite it being a guaranteed call for another player. However, in this scenario, there were calls during the Mavericks-Pacers game that were clear fouls that any player should get. Throughout the course of the game and season as a whole, Luka had become more and more fed up with each game he felt was officiated unfairly for him. However, the breaking point came after Edmund Sumner delivered a clear knee to Luka's jaw. Also in this game, Pacers star Victor Oladipo delivered a hit to Doncic that knocked him to the floor for several seconds and even drew blood. After the game, Luka did not hold back on the refs when he was asked about some questionable calls throughout the game. He was quoted as saying, "They hit me in the face, and that should be a foul. They should look at it." I think that's the rule when you get hit in the face. They've got to look if it's flagrant or no, right? Like I said, I was hit in the face 3 times. 2 of them were not a foul. They didn't care. It was clear. Everybody saw on the Jumbotron. There are few players in the league who have not taken to complaining to the media about officials, although many do it in a much more subtle way. It is almost certain that the league fined Luka for his outburst. However, after months of frustration over officiating, Luka could have handled this situation much worse than he did. Luka is never satisfied. The next moment is a testament to the anger that Luka carries himself with on the court, and is fueled by his competitiveness and his desire to better himself and become a better player. After a game against the Phoenix Suns in which Luka showed out, and many players would be very content with a team win and his exceptional performance, Luka was still angry. The Mavericks beat the Suns 104-94. Luka dominated this game with a stat line of 30 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 assists. A big moment from this game came when Suns small forward Kelly Oubre Jr., who is a solid defender in the league, slapped the floor as Luka was bringing the ball up the court, and Luka went on to score on Oubre just seconds after he slapped the floor. After the game, Luka did his duties as a star. He put up incredible numbers in a win, took on-court interviews, and even went on a local TV program and did an interview after the game. However, even after all this, Luka kept his pent-up rage hidden from the public, but after his television appearance, Mavericks staff saw him angrily walking back to the locker room. They saw him go into the basement and proceed to practice free throws after playing 36 minutes in the game, scoring 30 points, taking multiple interviews, and appearing on TV. Luka was sent to the free throw line for 14 attempts, and he missed 6 of them. The fact that his anger in this small facet of an otherwise perfect game was stuck with him for hours and pushed him to practice is truly incredible, and shows the work ethic that he has, along with the lengths that his anger drives him to improve his game. Euroleague Fight. The final moment comes from very early in Luka's career. Back even in his time in the Euroleague, Luka had an angry side, and this side shined brightly in a game against Valencia. To begin, a foul was called ending the play. However, Luka still went up for a shot at the rim that a Valencia defender contested. Luka extended his arm to defend himself in the air. However, that arm caught him in the face and left him profusely bleeding from the nose. Later in the game, after Luka was called for an offensive foul, he got in the face of an opposing player and began talking smack to him. The final strike for Luka in this game happened shortly after his altercation with the player. While the officials were reviewing the foul to determine whether it was an offensive or defensive foul, Luka would say something either to an opposing player or an official that would cause him to pick up a technical foul. This pushed Luka over the edge. He would begin to walk off the court before angrily storming back onto the court and getting in the face of an official and giving him a piece of his mind. After this, he would walk off the court in anger and even kick a tunnel on his way out. This is the biggest outburst we have ever seen from Luka, and is likely the biggest scene we will ever see him make in his career. Final thoughts. In conclusion, Luka Doncic is one of the most competitive players in the league, and sometimes that competitive streak can quickly turn to anger. His anger issues began in his overseas career, and could be explained as being one of the youngest players on the court, and trying to prove himself to his teammates and competition, who could have been old enough to be his father. The anger has carried over to his career in the NBA. However, this anger rarely is outrageous and rarely hurts himself or his teams. In fact, if he did not have these anger issues, it is likely that he would not be the player that he is today. it's likely he would not push himself to continue to better himself as a player, in almost an unhealthy way like after the game against the Suns, where he practiced free throws after playing 36 minutes, scoring 30 points, and doing countless interviews afterwards. Thank you for watching another UpNext Sports video. Make sure to subscribe to this channel to see more basketball content similar to this.